Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone. Thank you all for joining us for today's webinar, Strategies for Essay Writing, Helping Adult Learners Become Stronger Writers. This webinar is hosted by Florida Literacy Coalition and made possible through the support of the Florida Department of Education, Division of Career and Adult Education. Before we get started, I'd like to show you your control panel and give you a few starting instructions. So as you'll notice on your control panel, there is a red arrow button at the top of it. If you have your mouse over your control panel, the control panel will stay off. It will stay up. If you move your mouse away from the control panel and into your control panel will automatically minimize. In order to get it back out, all you have to do is click that red button. Also on here is going to be handouts. I'd like to turn your attention to the two handouts we have here. You have the PowerPoint presentation, and then you have a PDF for all the handouts. If you click that now, you'll be able to download it. I suggest you click it and try and download it now before the start of the webinar. But if you're having trouble doing it or you don't necessarily want to, you don't have to do it right now. At the bottom of your control panel, you'll see a questions box. So you can type questions to the presenter here. You can also type in questions that you're having in terms of technical support. So if something's going wrong, just go ahead and type it in there and I'll answer privately. For the questions you have based on content and for the presenter, I'll be reading those out loud to our presenter today. So with that, I would like to turn it over to Ann Meisanzahl. Ann is a curriculum writer and instructor for ACE of Leon County Schools. Ann?
Hi, oops, start broadcast.
Yeah,
there we go. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, great. Hi, everybody. My name is Ann, as she said. I am a teacher, longstanding teacher with adult and community education in Leon County. I've been teaching adults and children, but mostly adults for over 30 years. And I'm very excited to be doing this webinar today because I have to say how much I appreciate the work of the Florida Literacy Coalition to do teacher training and professional development. I think it's just a wonderful package of things that they offer for educators because we're all learning as we go. And I also really appreciate how much they make an effort to encourage adult learners to write, because I obviously think that's such an important life skill. Later on in the webinar, we'll be talking about their essay contest, which is a brilliant project that they do every year to encourage writing on the part of adult learners. So let's get started. I want to talk with you today about strategies for encouraging students to write. Let's see, I want to make sure I get my little box out of the way here. Many of our students have been discouraged by the way writing has been taught in public school. I like this little cartoon because it's a reminder that we don't do a lot of authentic writing in school. We don't learn how to fill out forms, or we don't learn how to write letters necessarily, or write to express our opinions about things. We do a lot of writing, evidence-based writing, and true, false, and fill in the blank. Schools don't do the best job of teaching us authentic writing, but we have an opportunity to do that in our rooms. Why should students write essays? It's my belief that writing essays gives adult ed, GED, and ESOL learners the opportunity to express their opinions and thoughts about topics that are meaningful and engaging to them and their readers. And they become, in the process, they become familiar with the steps of the writing process, and they are able to learn how powerful written communication is. Essay writing gives students the opportunity to write for a reason, not just for a grade or a test. We are preparing them for the CASAS test and for the GED and for the TABE, but why not write for a reason in the service of also preparing for those tests? Essay writing helps students develop critical thinking skills, meaningful communication skills, and it can really help to connect them to the larger world. It can motivate students who are reluctant writers if we give them the right kinds of tools and skills and prompts. It can help students see how many purposes there are for writing, and it can give students tools for communicating thoughts and feelings, which, as we know in adult education, our students come in with lots and lots of issues and baggage and concerns, and writing can be a very powerful way for them to communicate some of the things that are going on with them. It may even help them retain in the program because they feel heard and because they feel that they have an opportunity to express themselves and work through some of the things that they're going through. Essay writing teaches grammar, punctuation, capitalization, and spelling, all the things that we want them to learn in order to pass the test, but in an authentic way. And it can actually reduce the stress of writing for a grade or a test because they're practicing and practicing without the test hanging over their head. But when they become, when they're asked to demonstrate those skills on a test, they've practiced in a non-stressful context. Essay writing is communicating, and that's what we want our students to be better skilled at doing. In this webinar today, I'm going to share with you activities, graphic organizers, and strategies that will help learners do pre-writing activities to enrich their vocabulary and extend ideas. Will help them select a topic that engages them, because just like we read better when we're reading about something that interests us, we write better when we're writing about something that interests us. We're going to share strategies for helping them organize their thoughts, their ideas, and their feelings. And we're going to teach them how to compose a rough draft and how to prepare for the editing and revising and eventual publication process. So let's start with pre-writing activities. First of all, in your handout on page 1, there is a worksheet that I would introduce to the students right in the beginning. First, I would ask them to brainstorm, why do we write? And then I would share with them that we can break down the purposes for writing into 4 categories. To narrate, and how important narrating and storytelling is. To explain, to inform. We can talk about exposition, we can talk about teaching and the role that teaching plays in writing, whether it's instructions, recipes, biographies that teach, or history books, science, so writing that explains or informs. We could talk about the role that persuasion plays in writing, trying to convince other people to understand our opinion, to support our opinions with evidence, and then to share our opinions, our strong opinions that are backed up with evidence and reasons in all kinds of contexts. And again, I would brainstorm these with the students, that letters to the editor, speeches, book reviews, movie reviews, those are all examples of persuasive writing. I missed a slide here, excuse me. One of the most powerful reasons for writing is to express feelings and thoughts. And this is one that our students love to tap into, this particular mode of writing, which is expressive writing. It can be a really healthy outlet for personal emotions that they might otherwise be distracted, but if we give them a chance to write about what they're feeling, they can maybe then focus a little bit better. Expressive writing is a validation of their experience and their individuality. It can be an opportunity for reflection, and then we could brainstorm with them all the different kinds of expressive writing that are out there, whether it's rap songs, poems, letters, songs. Again, I'm going to remind you that the Florida Literacy Coalition essay book, which we're going to be talking about at the end, is just full of very powerful expressive writing and narrated writing and persuasive writing that students do to help them develop their skills, but also share their experiences with others. So one thing I would do right in the beginning of doing writing activities with students is talk with them about the power of writing descriptively, about sensory language, about using synonyms to expand vocabulary. Just today I wrote a number of sentences on the board that were fairly boring, dull sentences, and I underlined some of the key verbs and adjectives, and I asked them to brainstorm together what are some other more interesting ways to say those things. So lots of just practice with expanding their vocabulary, saying things in a more interesting way, and using more sensory and descriptive language. One thing I often do is I ask students to describe a place that they enjoy being, and then to ask them to describe it using the 5 senses. And that's going to pull out a lot of vivid imagery. It's going to pull out more sensory language and more description. And then, of course, playing with synonyms. I love this. The one cowboy says, well, then, shove, kick, whack, thump, bash, hit, gouge, and punch. And he said, those are fighting words. So I love this because it's just a reminder, and there's so many examples of how many different ways there are to say things in interesting ways. And you can do brainstorms with students where you put a list of words and see how many synonyms they can come up with. And have them take a piece of text and rewrite it in their own words using synonyms. So lots of practice with that. And there are lots of daily things that we can do in the classroom to encourage students to express their thoughts and feelings that are not necessarily going to be for publication or even for turning them into a final essay, but opportunities to just get used to writing about their feelings and thoughts on a daily basis. So it might be a daily journal prompt. It might be a question with a response. I've often put quotes on the board and asked students to respond to the quotes. I might ask a question and have them write advice, thank you letters, short poems. So again, not necessarily in the beginning for publication, but just lots of practice with expressing themselves. One tool that's in your package of handouts, which helps express feelings and also generates new interesting vocabulary, is an emotions wheel. So on page 2 of the handout, you'll see some of the primary words are in the middle that students are familiar with: fear, anger, surprise, happy, sad, disgust. What are some other interesting ways to say that? Instead of saying, I feel sad, how about really honing in and saying, I feel powerless and abandoned, or I felt that way yesterday, but today I feel peaceful, confident, courageous, and loving. So instead of happy and sad, we can express our feelings in richer ways. I didn't include this in this package of handouts. I should have, but I have a list of adjectives that I think I just found it online, of adjectives that describe a personality, and it's 2 pages long of any positive and negative adjective you can think of, and I sometimes will just ask the student to describe themselves using that list. And that's a reminder too of how many of these resources are online. If you say, you know, interesting vocabulary about whatever topic, you'll come up with all kinds of good stuff. One of the tools that I love to use that never fails to interest our students is to ask them to write autobiographies. And I might lead into a larger autobiography by asking them to write an I am poem. And this is very helpful to beginning writers because it's a template where they literally fill in the blanks, and then they can, let's say we have access to computers, they could fill it in by hand. We could discuss the language that they've picked and go through it together, and then they can type it up and they've got themselves a poem. Now this particular template here I found online. This is a great website, www.dailyteachingtools.com. Got tons of graphic organizers, and this website address will come up again. But I wanted to share with you that some of the things that I use I just found online and printed out for free, and others I've created that I'll share with you as well. This was at that same website, an autobio poem, again, a template where students fill in the blanks. And the thing for my beginning writers, I can't tell you enough how when they've used these guiding phrases, they've typed it up and they've printed it out, how proud they always are of themselves. I always ask them to share with the class, and they always want to. Every once in a while I have a reluctant student, but for the most part, it's very encouraging for them to come up with a poem on their own with a little bit of support from these prompts. Now I wanted to share with you that Adult and Community Education in Tallahassee in Leon County has created an online curriculum. And the curriculum is found at this website address, aceleon.org/transitions. The curriculum is designed to be used in correctional settings and in GED, ABE, and ESOL settings. So this particular, very similar to the ones we saw before, this particular poem is in that curriculum in Unit 19, Writing Your Autobiography. This is in your handout as well, but it can also be found by going online and printing it out if you go to team. Similarly, I just did this in class today, as a matter of fact. I had students fill in the blanks, type it up, and they have a beautiful autobiography poem when they're done. Another thing in terms of writing from their own experience is asking students to write advice poems. Everybody's got advice for other people, and our students are no exception. On aceleon.org, I made a mistake there, by the way. That shouldn't have a dash in that website address. It's just aceleon.org. At that site, there are a couple of places where you can find these advice poems. In Unit 16 and Unit 3, we have a number of examples of student writing, and then asking students to read other students' writing and then generate their own advice poems. In your handout package on pages 14 through 18, you'll see a couple of those activities that you could just copy and use with your class. For example, there's a poem by Langston Hughes called Mother to Son, which is a poem of a mother talking about her experience and giving her advice to her son. It's a great poem to read and deconstruct and understand the language, and then to use as a model for writing a poem using metaphors and similes in order to write poems of advice. Pages 16 through 18 are poems that students have written following that model, where they write advice using similes and metaphors, comparing life to something else in order to make a point. So that's a really fun one to use. Here's an example. Life is a vast ocean. One of my students wrote, one of the students at the homeless shelter. I thought this was quite beautiful. Life is an ocean that has no mercy, so go out for a ride and prove that you're thirsty. Some very creative stuff comes up. So let's, there's more, but let's just stop here for a minute and see, Nicole, if anybody has any questions.
There are no questions yet. We do have a comment that someone liked your the wheel tool a lot.
Good, good. Great, I'm glad to hear it. Well, I'll keep going, and then you can let me know at any point if you need to interrupt me.
Sure.
So we've done some pre-writing activities, we've done some poems and some reading of other poetry, and we've generated descriptive language and synonyms and emotional feeling and journal writing. Now we might ask students to write a full-on essay. And I might start that by generating topics that have interest for them. We want them to pick topics that engage them and that excite them. We want to give them opportunities to express their opinions and to support their opinions. I thought this was a beautiful quote from Anne Frank. Opinions are powerful. One way to encourage students to express their thoughts and opinions is to respond to quotes. In your handout on pages 4 through 6 is something that I call words of wisdom. And in every unit of the curriculum, again, I did not edit this correctly, and it should be aceleon.org, no dash. In every unit of this curriculum, there are words of wisdom. And this is a collection of quotes on a topic where students read the quotes, talk about what they think the quotes mean, and then pick one to respond to. And it can be a powerful way for them to engage with big ideas and to talk about their opinions and experiences relating to that big idea. And here's an example of what those look like. So a list of quotes about options and opportunities, and then an opportunity to pick a quote and to reflect on it in your own words. The other thing I might do is I might encourage students to generate lists. What are some things that we might talk about, that we might want to write about rather? Or I might use this list and photocopy it and have it on the table for them to go through and pick. You can get them to stimulate ideas, and then you can also present ideas for them. These are an example of some of the topics that usually engage our students pretty well. Childhood experiences, things I'm thankful for. I do it every year, and we got long lists of all the things that they appreciate about their lives, which can be a really wonderful tool. Things that make me sad, things that make me happy, things we should teach our children, etc. Another way to stimulate writing, and this one is especially helpful as we prepare for students for the GED, is to go to the website procon.org, and I'd be curious if anybody has used this website before, and to, again, brainstorm with the students what are some topics that they are interested in, think are important current events, and maybe pick a couple of topics and then go to the website. And what they have at this website are pithy, well articulated arguments on both sides of an issue. So if we were to go to death penalty, for example, there may be 4 well-known people or people with lots of education and expertise who write their opinions in favor of the death penalty and likewise against it. Read those with the students, help them pick out evidence to support which they think is more strongly supported, and then use the evidence to express their opinion based on what they've read in those articles. It's really it's a powerful tool, especially at the GED level. I also have a handout in your packet of essay topics, and sometimes students know immediately what they want to write about, and sometimes they really appreciate having suggestions. So this is a list of just a number of kind of popular essay topics that you may encourage your students to pick one and to write about, and then we'll go through the stages of the writing process and then share with the class. Any one of these I think would also be acceptable in the Florida Literacy Coalition essay book, because they're pretty similar to some of the topics that they have suggested, but we'll share those with you too. And part of the reason for these topics is they tap into what those of us who've been doing this for a while understand are issues that are important to our students and that have meaning for them. There are a number of other handouts in your packet. There's a prompt called What Motivates You. There's a prompt called Creating Your Mission Statement, where, and I don't want to go into detail with each one, but I will encourage you to print that out and take a look at whether or not you think these are something that you could use in your class. And they are self-contained, ready-made little worksheets that have the directions on them that you can just share with the class and encourage them to write. And I've always had success with these. Any questions at this point?
All right, we do have a couple of questions now.
Okay.
The first question we have is, do you have any tips on how to help students get over their fear using incorrect grammar and punctuation that may inhibit their willingness to express themselves in writing?
I think that's a really good question, because that does come up. Our students have been, rightfully taught that there's a right and wrong way to express themselves, but sometimes with more of a focus on being correct in the details than in the expression part. So lots of encouragement, I would say, in expressing your ideas, putting them on paper with the idea that, don't worry, we will correct it later. And so, in other words, we're not avoiding the fact that it's important to have correct capital letters and punctuation and grammar and sentence structure, but we don't want that to inhibit their ability to get their words on the page. So free writing is a great way to do that, to say, okay, put your pencil to the paper and I want you to write for 5 minutes without stopping, and don't worry about any of the technical details, just get the words on the page and then we'll go over it afterwards. My experience is that the culture that you create in the class of expressing oneself and lots of praise and lots of encouragement and lots of appreciation for effort goes a long way to making students feel comfortable. Sometimes I tell them, you can do a rough copy with pencil and paper. When we get to the computer's going to help us, and we'll work on the capitals and periods. But we want to have the draft in front of us first in order to not kind of obsess line by line, word for word. Just put it out and then we'll work on it later. I don't know if that helps, but that's more than anything in my experience, what works is just a climate and a culture of encouragement for expression. And again, I think if you do a lot of those pre-writing activities first, where you just say, just make a list of all the things you're thankful for, or describe going to the park and all the things you smell and see and hear. We're not publishing this. It's not for a grade. We're not going to give you a percentage of all the mistakes. All we want to do is hear your opinion, and then you're going to read it to us. And I'm not necessarily even going to look at that piece of paper. I'm just going to encourage you to get your ideas out there. So let me know if there's more that I can share about that, or if that's helpful.
The next question I have here is how to handle students who have experiences from dysfunctional families.
Well, I mean, I'm all about using writing as a tool to express feelings that are hard. Now, whether they want to share those publicly or not is completely up to them, but sharing them for their own sake, for their own healing, and giving them opportunities for problem solving, I think is one of the most powerful tools we can use. I'll tell you a story of a student in my class who was very reticent, very shy, very surly, frankly, and grouchy much of the time, didn't want to do much work. When everybody else was writing in response to, I believe at this point we were writing in response to quotes and words of wisdom, he said, I just want to write about, and I had introduced the autobiography package. I have this in Unit 19 of the curriculum is a full-on 20-page autobiography package with prompts. I had introduced that as an option if that's something you wanted to work on a little bit every day. He said, that's all I want to do is write my autobiography. He sat at the computer and he wrote a story of having been severely physically abused as a child, and his father being in prison and his mother being in prison for having beaten him and his sister. And he dumped it all onto the page, and he insisted then that we all listen to it, and he wanted it read over and over again. And frankly, I've come to see that he saw the writing of that story as deeply therapeutic, and the fact that we all responded so kindly and compassionately and with such interest and care. And I have these lovely young women students who were as supportive as could be and sweet about it. And I think he found the whole experience very therapeutic. And I've had many students write about pretty sad, pretty hard, dysfunctional experiences and have cried while they were writing, and they have written about how they feel like they need to heal. And I just think it's benefited them greatly. So I wouldn't avoid the topic. I would certainly give them the choice about whether they wanted to read out loud or whether they wanted to publish it. That would be their choice, obviously. I would tell them that they could even keep it private from me if they didn't want to go over it with me, but most of the time they do want somebody to read it. So again, let me know if that's helpful.
And that's it for questions for now.
Okay, thank you. Okay, those are great questions, by the way, because they are the they're sensitive issues. So now we've started the process of writing full-on essays. So how are we going to get them to be as polished and as well written as possible? How are they going to be organized and expressed in a way that incorporates all of the good writing skills that we want our students to have? First, I think we would actually spend some upfront time teaching about the process of writing an essay. I like this tool. I found it in a GED book somewhere and kind of adapted it, but it's called the Power graphic. First, you plan your essay. Make sure you understand the question that you're answering and figure out your main idea. Organize your essay by grouping your ideas and expanding your example. Then you write your essay with an introduction, a main idea, and supporting ideas, and body paragraphs. Evaluating it is just a reminder that we always read and review what we've read to make sure it makes sense to ourselves and to our readers. And then the last step would be to revise, and that includes both revising ideas and editing for clarity, spelling, punctuation, capitalization, etc. So this is a tool that's kind of a reminder to students of all the things that are involved in writing a really solid essay. And this is in your handout package as well on page 22. Now, in terms of organizational strategies, there are all kinds of great graphic organizers online, and I have not included them all in your handout because they're not mine. I didn't invent them, but they're also very easy to find. So you might type in hamburger graphic organizer and a really good tool is going to come up. There's anybody who's either had elementary school kids or taught elementary school has probably seen some of these. And they're for some students, it can be pretty helpful. There are project planning maps. This is, again, dailyteachingtools.com. This is the hamburger or the sandwich method of organizing, where you have an introduction, 3 body paragraphs, and a conclusion. I always tell students that if you go to the drive-thru at Burger King and you ask for a hamburger and all they gave you was the bun, you'd be pretty upset. So you don't want an essay that doesn't have a lot of good, juicy information in the middle. Otherwise, you're going to feel like it's not a very good sandwich. So this model helps them see what kind of holds it together and what needs to be in the middle. Here's another graphic organizer for persuading people of your position by reminding us that we should have some solid reasons and then some support and examples for those reasons. I like this one just because you could actually have Oreos out while they're doing it, and that would be motivating. This one is at scholastic.com. And it's fun because it's a similar idea that we, there's a structure to planning, but it's a little bit easier for students to remember because of this structure. There's another one. Again, and the best thing to do is to, take a few minutes and go online yourself and explore any of these that you think are clear, that speak to your students, that relate to the level they're at, but there are all kinds of good ones out there, and this one's also from Scholastic. So this is what the Florida Literacy Coalition essay book looks like. It's a beautiful resource. Nicole was just telling me that the essays in the essay book are available online as free PDFs on the essay book page. So one thing that definitely stimulates students is reading what other students have written. So if you were to go on and pick a couple of essays, maybe with topics that you wanted your students to write about, a turning point in my life, let's say, you might find a number of essays with that heading. Read them out loud, talk about the vocabulary, talk about what do they think the writer meant, and then encourage them to write on that topic from their own experience. Very powerful. One of the reasons we want to share writing from other students is because it's a great way to model the organization of an essay, gives them ideas, stimulates their thinking, but it also helps them to feel connected to other learners, like they're part of a larger community. I always tell them that this essay book draws from students all over the state of Florida, and they're always very excited to learn that there are adult education programs all over the state. It helps them develop confidence to realize they can write as well as other students, and it gets them excited about the writing process, but also about the publishing process. That, again, when we talk about writing for a reason, I like to encourage students to remember that if you write, other people get to read it. So you're not only writing for yourself, and again, it can be powerful just to write for yourself if that's where you're at in terms of your therapeutic needs, journaling, etc. But one of the fun things about writing is if you do write something that you're going to share with other people, is to know that you are impacting them. You're teaching them something from your own experience. So after we've generated a lot of writing, maybe we've gotten 3 or 4 essays that students have written, and we're going to make sure that those essays are ready for publication. Revising and editing are a good way to practice all those skills that are on the TABE, on the CASAS, on the GED, but in a way that's authentic. I am fortunate enough to have a computer lab, and for those people who have access to computers, I think that students may want to write in a journal, or they may want to free write with pencil and paper, but then having them type up everything that they write on the computer is going to help them practice those typing skills, but it's also going to help them in a more clear way practice all the discrete skills that we've taught them in the workbooks about capitals, sentence structure, punctuation, etc., but in a meaningful context. And there you may develop a question sheet that, and again, you can find these all over online, with a list of questions to consider when they reread their essay. Is my introduction clear? Are my sentences complete? Can I add more information? Can I move any of my sentences or paragraphs? Are there any more words, different words that I can use, etc.? You may have this as a poster, that's hanging on the wall that they look at when they're revising. I typed in peer editing checklist, and I came up with about 20 free peer editing forms that you could print out and use in your class. And so you would choose the one that works for you. You might have it taped on the desk next to the computer so that every time they type, they do, or everybody has a copy and they do a little checklist to make sure that they have, checked all of their language mechanics, but also reviewed the content, reviewed the contents of the essay to make sure they're clear and as well expressed as possible. And you may have them do this with each other's work. That would be the beauty of a peer editing. I sit next to you with your essay and the peer editing checklist, and we go over it together. And so they're revising each other's work and getting more practice that way. The Florida Literacy Coalition Essay Book Contest is, in my mind, one of the best ways to encourage students to do the kind of writing we've been talking about, because they value it so much that they collect the students' writing into a beautiful essay book. You'll notice that I haven't revised and edited this very well because I wrote 2017 by mistake. Should say 2020, I believe, because the essay book will be coming out in May of 2020, I think. But they give you a list of topics that they suggest. So these are very similar to the ones that are in the handout and that we've talked about. I have sometimes had students submit essays that were not quite on that list, but close enough, and that they were selected for the book. And on the website, they're very clear about the process of helping students to submit their essays. So they have a whole little online application form. And I was telling Nicole earlier that what I really appreciate about this essay book is that it gives students opportunities to do all the things that we've been talking about in the webinar in terms of generating ideas, expressing feelings, expressing their ideas clearly, developing an essay, practicing language mechanics, but also they get to practice going online and filling out an online application, uploading their essay to send it into the contest, including their email address, including a little biography of themselves. So it's a very kind of professional process for submitting their essay online. And then the Florida Literacy Coalition folks will review the essays and then get back in touch about whether or not the essays are accepted and in the book. Let's see what I've included here.
And I do want to add something.
Yeah.
I just want to clarify that the essay book is a physical book that we publish. If that's not clear, I know you mentioned publishing it, but I do want to mention that it's a physical book. Yeah. It will be for the 2020 conference in late April, early May.
Late April, early May. Thank you.
No problem.
And I'm going to go ahead to the next slide, but then I'll come back. February 20th is the deadline. Is that correct?
Not quite.
No? Okay.
It's February.
And it says 2019. Oh my goodness. What should it be?
It's February 4th.
February, where did I get this? Okay, February 4th, 2020.
It looks like you had the old information.
That's what I had. Okay.
Year. So.
Okay, my bad.
No
February
problem.
4th. Please ignore this slide. Let's get out of here. But it's all online and it's easy to find if you go to the right place instead of the wrong place where I went. Submissions should be no longer than 475 words, which is plenty for a good 5-paragraph essay. And authors can choose to remain anonymous, but I have always had the idea of a biographical paragraph that is going to be published in the book along with their essay. Everyone who is included in the book receives a free copy, and that's a really motivating incentive for our students to write and to write well. Many of them have never seen their words in print before. They love the idea that they can, give it as a gift to their grandmother to show them that what they've been doing in class. It's a lovely end product for all the work that you've been doing. And it's possible for the adult literacy program to get a copy as well. And I think, Nicole, they could talk to you about the possibility of maybe getting a couple of more. So it's, as I say, it's very motivating. I'll just add one thing because we have a couple of minutes, and that is that in addition to the Florida Literacy Coalition essay book, what I have also done in my class that I didn't mention here, but every semester I collect all of the essays that the students have produced, and we've been collecting them all along because they've been typing them on the computer, and I just make sure to save them in a way that's easy to find them, and then turn them into an anthology of student writing. So, for example, next week, because of the holidays, I'll be giving everybody a copy of all the student writing in the class, and in book form, just as stapled, or sometimes I use a little plastic ring binder. They're always thrilled to get those. And again, sometimes they ask for an extra copy to give their mother for Christmas or whatever it is, because it's the first time not only have they seen their own work published, but they have seen it in combination with all of their classmates, and they just really can see the work that has gone into creating these essays, especially going from the rough draft to these beautifully polished pieces. So if it's possible for you to do that, I encourage you to do that as well. But if not, certainly having students submit their essays to the essay book is also extremely motivating. And don't look at that deadline, it's wrong, February 4th, 2020. And let me go back. So that's all I have. And at this point, I wonder if there are any more questions.
We do have another question. Let me go ahead and pull that up. Okay, so the restating part of the conclusion is a problem for even adult ESOL. Any tips?
Yes, restating is hard for all of our students because I have had students say to me, and I found this myself in my own writing, that if somebody's already written it well, or if I already wrote it well, why would I want to change it and write it differently? So if we're talking about paraphrasing what another author has written, that's just a matter of practicing, again, synonyms, syntax, how to say this differently. We might practice it out loud to say it. How could we say that differently? In terms of restating in your own words what you've written, and I think it's something that we practice by saying, well, why don't you just tell me in your own words first? And why don't we, and again, you can engage other students, I would say, to work in small groups, maybe practice, take a few sentences and ask in small groups to think of 3 different ways we could say those sentences, using synonyms, using a different order of the words, practicing saying it slightly differently. I don't know if that's helpful.
We have another question here. Could you talk a little more about peer reviews? How do you first introduce the concept and model it?
So I would say, so one way to model it might be to do it as a large group first. So Sometimes I'll take an anonymous essay, and it could be one of our students' essays, or it could be one that I've found in an adult collection. Or it could be one, frankly, that I've just made up myself. And I might project it if I have a projector to project off the computer, or an overhead, or I might give everybody a copy. And I might pair that with a peer editing sheet. And as a group, then I think I would practice, okay, let's go through the steps of this peer editing checklist, and let's say, what do you think that this writer did? And again, this is an anonymous writer, so there's no pressure, nobody's feeling judged yet, and we're just reviewing this as practice. And so let's go through the peer editing checklist. How did this person do with capital letters? How did they do with periods, question marks, other punctuation? How's their sentence structure? Did this person organize their ideas? Is there any way they could have phrased it differently or put it in a different order? So I would talk through a couple of different essays that way using the peer editing checklist. And then after we're comfortable with that checklist, we're comfortable with how to give our feedback on an anonymous essay, then let's do it in pairs. And again, everybody's class is different, who works well together, who's going to be helpful as opposed to judgmental. Maybe we want to work in sets of 3 or in pairs to practice that with each other's essays. I sometimes just do it. I have a small enough class, fortunately, that I can sit next to each student and we kind of do it together. And I take turns moving around to the different students. So you could do it peer to teacher, you could do it whole group to using the checklist with an essay, or you could do it in pairs. And in pairs, you would take turns doing each other's work. So we're going to work on student A, and after we've looked at it together, then we're going to look at the other students' work. So just practice just doing it kind of over and over in different ways so that they get comfortable with it. That's what I would suggest. These are really good questions, by the way.
And that was the last question.
Okay. Well, good. Nicole, is there anything else you can think of that I should add or that we need to say about the contest?
No, I just wanted to do some housekeeping on the back end. Thank you all for joining us for this webinar today. Just as a reminder, I will be sending a follow-up email to everyone. It's going to include the survey. Please take the survey. It helps inform our office for the future. So please take the time to fill that out. Also, again, I want to thank the Florida Department of Education, Division of Career and Adult Education, for making this webinar possible. Our website also has lots of writing resources. So under the resource tab in our website, we also have tons of resources there. And that could be specifically helpful if you're planning on submitting essays. So with that, thank you, Anne. Thank you so much for coming and doing this. And I'd like to wish everyone a happy holiday.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Nicole.
Thank you.